What kind of secret needs to be buried under miles of ice? What sort of weapon can sleep beneath the snow, unseen, unheard, waiting for the order to end the world? How far would a nation go to build the illusion of peace while preparing for total annihilation? And when the ice begins to move, what happens to the lies frozen inside it? Wind howls across an endless white wasteland. Static crackles through an old radio. Footsteps echo in a steel tunnel. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of a reactor pulses beneath tons of snow. It's 1959. The world is locked in the Cold War, an age of silence more dangerous than open war. And beneath Greenland's frozen desert, the United States Army begins one of the strangest, most secret experiments in history. They called it Camp Century. Officially, a research station. Unofficially, a cover for something far darker. Project Iceworm. At the height of the Cold War, the Arctic wasn't just cold, it was strategic. Whoever ruled the top of the world could strike anywhere below. To Washington, Greenland, a vast, empty island halfway between America and the Soviet Union, was perfect. In 1959, convoys of snow tractors crawled across its surface, dragging steel, lumber, and nuclear ambition through 200 kilometers of blizzard. Each machine left behind a trail that vanished within minutes. Men disappeared into the horizon, swallowed by a world of white. Underneath, engineers carved a labyrinth, tunnels for laboratories, dormitories, mess halls, even a chapel and a barber shop. Electric cables ran through walls of blue ice. Pipes froze, cracked, and were replaced. The sound of picks and drills echoed endlessly, metal against ice, men against nature. Inside those frozen corridors, light flickered through thin bulbs. Men slept in narrow bunks, listening to the glacier groan and shift above their heads. Some said they could feel it breathing at night. They called it the city under the ice. To the world, it was a marvel of engineering. To the Pentagon, it was camouflage. Behind cheerful press releases about renewable Arctic energy, the Army tested a weapon platform hidden in plain sight. The plan was bold, borderline insane. 4,000 kilometers of tunnels across Greenland, housing 600 nuclear missiles aimed at the Soviet Union. Each missile would glide through the ice on underground tracks, constantly moving so no enemy could find them. A frozen dagger aimed at the heart of Moscow. But the ice doesn't care about ambition. By 1960, the tunnels began to move, bending, cracking, collapsing under pressure. Ceilings sagged, floors buckled. The engineers measured the glacier's movement in centimeters per month, enough to crush everything they built. Still, the Pentagon insisted the project continue. The fear of falling behind the Soviets was stronger than the fear of physics. If Moscow discovered Project Iceworm, it could mean international outrage or war. So the operation stayed buried beneath layers of snow and silence. Life in Camp Century was surreal. Inside, it felt like a tiny American town sealed inside a coffin of ice. A library, a kitchen, a movie theater carved from frozen walls. Men played cards under fluorescent lights while outside. Storms howled for days. Some grew restless. Others started talking to the ice. Mail arrived weeks late. Radios failed. When someone got sick, evacuation meant days of travel through blizzards. The temperature outside could kill exposed skin in seconds. Inside, the temperature of sanity slowly dropped. And yet, beneath the exhaustion and isolation, there was pride. They believed they were protecting the world from nuclear disaster. By building the tools to create one, the heart of Camp Century was a small nuclear reactor, PM-2A. It hummed quietly, feeding light and warmth to men surrounded by endless darkness. But even the reactor trembled when the glacier moved. Cables snapped, fuel lines froze, Some nights the generator room glowed red from heat. Others, it froze solid before dawn. The ice was winning. If you're still here, you're one of the few who live for stories hidden beneath history. Stay with me, because what's coming next was never meant to be seen. Make sure you're subscribed, because this is where the truth breaks through the surface. By 1961, scientists realized Camp Century couldn't survive. The tunnels were warping faster than predicted. In some corridors, the roof pressed down like the ribs of a dying animal. The ice shifted relentlessly, like a sleeping giant rolling over. One morning, engineers found a steel beam bent into a perfect arc by nothing but the slow, unstoppable force of nature, and yet they kept digging. Because Project Iceworm wasn't officially dead, it just had to prove it couldn't live. Every tunnel collapse, every bent girder, became classified data. They were testing the limits of the planet itself. Meanwhile, Denmark began to ask questions. Greenland was Danish territory. When officials visited, the U.S. smiled and handed them coffee mugs with the Camp Century logo. The city under the ice. They toured the sleeping quarters, the labs, the chapel. No one mentioned the missiles. They left with souvenirs, unaware they just stood on top of a secret nuclear plan that violated their sovereignty. Below their feet, Project Iceworm continued, quietly, desperately, until the ice crushed the dream. By 1963, one of the main tunnels collapsed entirely. Supplies were buried. Equipment was lost. One soldier wrote in his diary, "Every step feels like walking through a throat that's closing." The nuclear reactor was next. When engineers noticed irregular heat readings, they shut it down. It took weeks to dismantle, pack, and remove. They left everything else behind. Waste, fuel, chemicals, buried beneath a thin promise. No one will ever come here again. By 1966, Project Iceworm was abandoned. The entrances were sealed, the files locked away. Official reports called it a scientific success. Unofficially, it was an embarrassment frozen in time. For decades, Camp Century slept. Its tunnels collapsed, its walls caved in, and snow erased the scars on the surface. But what was buried didn't stay silent. Under the ice, barrels of fuel, radioactive coolant, and biological waste remained trapped. And as the Arctic warmed, the ice began to melt faster than anyone predicted. By the 2000s, scientists studying satellite images found strange shapes, rectangles, shadows, lines, right where Camp Century once stood. At first, they thought it was nothing. Then, in 2016, a report shocked the world. If the ice keeps retreating, the remains of Camp Century could resurface, along with its nuclear and toxic waste. A Cold War secret thawing back to life. Suddenly, the frozen past wasn't just history. It was a threat. The very project built to defend humanity from destruction could one day poison the Arctic ecosystem. Denmark demanded answers. Washington claimed the risk was minimal. But deep down, both nations knew. The ice was melting, and time was running out. Scientists who studied the camp's remains uncovered something else, an irony buried within tragedy. Those same ice cores drilled for military research contained priceless data about Earth's climate. Half a century later, that data helped predict global warming, the very force now exposing the camp. Project Iceworm had created its own reckoning. There's a quiet poetry in that. A secret built on fear, now warning humanity of its consequences. The past whispering to the present, you can't bury your mistakes forever. Still, some details remain hidden. Documents show that early reports predicted the ice would shift too much for long-term construction. Others hinted that scientists warned their superiors, only to be ignored. Ambition was louder than caution. The dream of absolute power drowned out the sound of cracking ice. The men who served there rarely spoke about it. They endured months of isolation, darkness, and pressure, both physical and psychological. They watched ceilings bend, heard steel snap, and prayed the ice wouldn't swallow them in their sleep. They wrote letters home filled with jokes, but between the lines you can read the silence. Some never wanted to see snow again. Today, all that remains of Project Iceworm lies beneath layers of frozen time. Somewhere under the ice are the tunnels, the bunks, the reactor pit, the remnants of a forgotten empire's fear. And every year, the ice melts a little more. Satellites pass above, capturing faint patterns, straight lines where nature draws none. Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe it's the ghost of a base that refused to die. The irony is inescapable. A project built to control nature now depends on nature's mercy to stay hidden. And nature has stopped listening. Sooner or later, the Arctic will give back what the Cold War tried to take from it. The waste, the lies, the arrogance, everything buried will come to the surface. The men who built Project Iceworm thought they were hiding a weapon. What they really buried was a warning, one carved in ice and sealed with silence. History remembers the bombs that fell. It rarely remembers the ones that were waiting. But someday, when the ice finally breaks, the past will rise again. Slowly, quietly, and without permission. And the world will be forced to remember that the most dangerous mistakes are not the ones we make in war, but the ones we choose to freeze and forget.